I think one of the other things was thinking I wasn't ready for a job. That was like a internal mindset that I think was more detrimental than it needed to be, in terms of me going, I don't meet these requirements, or all the people at that company are just really good and I'm not there yet. I'm not at that level yet, kind of thing. And then at some point, something clicked in my brain. I was like, I'm just going to apply.
Hi, everyone. I'm with Dean today. Dean, would you like to start off by giving a little intro of yourself?
Sure. I'm a designer, mostly focused on leading design teams and building design teams. That's been my deep focus for the last 5 years. So that's like getting design teams organized, especially in large organizations that don't really have design as part of the fabric of their organization. Currently, I'm helping out Vodacom, which is part of the Vodafone group. So effectively like Vodafone South Africa. I've also worked in like small companies, and I just enjoy talking about these things, whether it be about mindset in design and how we approach our skill set, how we approach our careers. And I've done a bit of that all over the blue globe we live on. And yeah, that's kind of my background for the most part. I also am an avid gardener and grow loads of plants and fruit and vegetables and things, because why not?
That's awesome. Could you tell us a little bit about how you got your first design job?
It's a good question, because it probably could be answered in two parts. So my first paying design job was while I was still in high school. I used to be doing illustrations, specifically character illustrations and conceptualizing characters. And somebody connected me with somebody who connected me with somebody else. And they were like, could you help us with this comic book? Terrible work, but a great experience for me, at least. So that was like when I was 15. Yeah. And then my first form of employment, like when I was actually an employee, was also then while I was studying. So I went to go study communications, visual communications, and I did a marketing diploma at the same time, because I was obviously bored or something. I found a company that was doing some really interesting things. And so I was sent them an email. I was like, I will come and sit there and work there for free. I'll bring my own table, my own chair. Will you have me? Kind of thing. And they were like, okay. I think they were keen to have some extra labor, and they did pay me, actually not a whole lot, just enough for like fuel and stuff. But I was super grateful. I made some lifelong friends there. But I learned a boatload in that first job. Then I got what I would say is my first kind of proper real job, where I wasn't like studying and doing all sorts of stuff. I was working in advertising. I remember I sent out like 140 applications to different jobs. I had a pretty decent portfolio compared to my peers, of like real world work. And then like I had to try and figure out all the different things, like how to format my portfolio differently, and then maybe formatting my resume differently. And then what I started doing is I took my photo off. I remember this. I took my photo off so I got a lot more response from that back then, which I found interesting. I want to work on something interesting, even if I have to be broke and eating tinned food. And unfortunately, the guy who wanted to employ me, they didn't have a spot. He then put me in contact with a company who I had applied at, who never responded to me. He put me in contact with them. They then at least had a conversation with me. And when they met me, they were like, oh, we should employ you. And I found that to be a pattern, actually, for the rest of my career. It's like interacting cold, it's not great. But if I can get in the room, usually there's a meeting of minds and we can figure out if it is the right thing or not the right thing. So yeah, that's how I got my first job. Was like my first proper job was like that, actually.
Wow, that's really, no, this is really interesting. A couple of things that you mentioned around taking your picture off and you suddenly got more responses. I'm not sure how many people are still putting their photos on resumes.
Yeah, I
But
don't think a lot of people do. Yeah, in my
yeah.
experience, in terms of people who apply for jobs in my teams, I haven't seen a lot of photos in a long time.
Yeah. What were some of the challenges you experienced as you were trying to nail down your first job? I think you touched on the several number of applications that you sent out.
Yeah, I think that was also just my approach. So that was the one challenge. The other challenge I found was at that stage, and still in our industry, nobody was talking about diversity or any of that kind of stuff. And so a lot of the teams were of a certain kind of culture and a certain look and a certain kind of monoculture. And that was a barrier that was hard to overcome, because you can see it sometimes and you can feel it sometimes, but it was really hard, especially when I was just starting out, hard for me to articulate. You don't even know it's really going on, and neither do the people who have the bias. So you can't really be all that angry. There's a thing going on, especially when you apply for a job that you're qualified for, and then you don't get it, but then a person who's less qualified but fits the biased mold better does get that job. And so then that was quite challenging for me too. And so one of the strategies I kind of employed to try and overcome that kind of challenges, I just always tried to create more value than people could ignore. And so that at the end of the day, people just want that thing. Sometimes people are in a job they don't enjoy. And that was also a struggle coming up, is figuring that out for myself. Is like, where is it a bad job? That was also a thing. So figuring out industry. So in the beginning, I was in advertising and marketing, and I'd just come out of building like interesting products and stuff. And I did decently well in that job, but it didn't fill my center, if that makes sense. That was also a struggle around, you got to pay bills, but I do want to do work that is meaningful. And so that was also an interesting struggle in the early part of my career.
I'm curious to know if there were some things that you tried that you found later that didn't really end up working.
Yeah, I think most of the things is around like attitude and mindset that didn't work. So being too non-negotiable on certain like metrics for the job you want to apply for. So things like money, as an example, is something that I'm become very flexible on as regards like using it as a metric. When applying for some jobs, like my second or third job, I think, money was the metric because I was trying to fix some things in my life, etc. And then also trying to figure out what does movement actually look like for my career. But then I learned this thing, and it's something that I actually say quite often, is I had to figure out like the difference between an upward movement and a forward movement in my career. And so now I try to focus, and something I say to a lot of people is I try to focus to move forward more than I move up, because forward is more sustainable. You get a better career track in overall. And because if you use the ladder analogy, if you're trying to climb the ladder, ladders don't actually go anywhere. They're actually in the same place. So you just go vertically up and you don't actually experience more of the world. I think one of the other things was thinking I wasn't ready for a job. That was like a internal mindset that I think was more detrimental than it needed to be, in terms of me looking at a role and being like, okay, I don't meet these requirements, or all the people at that company are just really good and I'm not there yet. I'm not at that level yet, kind of thing. And then at some point, something clicked in my brain. I was like, I'm just going to apply. And I think part of that was seeing a lot of people getting jobs that I knew I was better than, but not as good as the people I wanted to be as good as. And then I was like, they're getting jobs. And maybe these people surely must have been at this stage at some point in their life. So I'm just going to try. And I think that was also one of the things that I struggled with, but then overcame. And so again, from a mindset point of view, I think that was one of the big blockers, is looking at job descriptions, and they're like, you need to be able to use, at that time, Photoshop, because Sketch didn't even exist yet. It's like, you have to use Photoshop, and you must be able to write HTML and CSS, and you must be able to do quantum physics, and underwater welding is preferential. And you're just like, I don't know how to underwater weld. Okay, apply anyway. That's how it feels. But also, I think on a more human level, there's an element of they're trying to replace a specific human being. And that specific human being had that set of skills. And when I left my second job, and this is why I clicked it, is they were doing that. They were trying to put all the things I did in that role in a company that I'd started as an intern and then was leaving as like a senior kind of lead. They were trying to take all that stuff that I did and they were like, let's put this all in here, and then running the intern program. And I was like, but guys, that's me. I don't think it's fair to think that there's another human that has a one-to-one, because what you're going to do is you're also going to exclude somebody who knows more than I do and does more things than I do. So when you're trying to hire people, it's something to be aware of. So on that side of the job spectrum.
I think what you just touched on there is really insightful, because that whole point around, one, like not feeling like you're ready for that job. I've talked to some recent grads, people who are trying to find jobs, and this feeling is still there. And it's mostly due to what you said, like seeing job descriptions and seeing 5 years plus experience wanted. The expectation is that you're this unicorn and you have to be this magical, incredible person in design. And so they actually don't end up applying because they're scared.
Yeah. And I empathize with it. So I think there's a bit of that healthy check in your brain to just double check your skill. I think is super important too, because on the flip side, there are many people that just apply and don't have the skill, and sometimes get it because maybe they're the only kind of people that apply for certain kinds of jobs. And all the people who are actually skilled, like, oh, I'm not ready. Yeah. So those people win. And I don't know if you're familiar with Dunning-Kruger effect, the psychological kind of bias or thing around skills.
Oh, please share.
So when you know a little bit about something, you're overconfident because you actually don't know what you don't know yet. And the skill you lack, the way they phrase it, is the ability to measure the skill. But then once you start getting better at something and you learn, you start to figure out, oh, I don't know about this and I don't know about this. I think that's actually healthy in some ways. It just becomes unhealthy when you over-index on it. When you're like, okay, well, I can never apply. I'm still like, we'll still apply. And then if they say no, then just be annoying and ask them for why, so that you can figure out where the gaps are. And I did that with a couple of interviews in my early jobs. If I didn't get them, I was really annoying. I was like, but tell me why. I want to know. So I thrive on feedback, not from like a validation point of view, but it's just because I'm genuinely curious around, okay, but what is the thing? Because sometimes we also put companies on a pedestal. You got to reconcile your perception of the job in the company and then reality, what's in between there, potentially.
Yeah. Yeah, that's such a great point. And some points you mentioned where we're thriving on feedback, like being annoying, that should be a catchphrase.
Yeah, I think, and because what's the worst that can happen? They'll get annoyed, and then cool. There are levels. You could be so annoying that they never want to talk to you again. That's not an outcome you want, but you just got to be willing to push a bit more than most people.
Exactly. Exactly. Yeah, you got it. I just want to change gears a little bit. And now, as a design lead and being part of, I'm assuming, like the hiring process and also hiring your own team and designers, how is that process for you now, sitting on the other side and going through people's resumes and portfolios?
I don't allow people to format what a candidate wants to send me, because I just feel like that's deleting some of who they are, because I want a human being to give their best self, or they have the opportunity to give their best self. I tend to also give people more opportunity to talk about themselves and their life and what they care about and their family situation, all those things, because I believe those things are also important. I think one thing that makes me sad sometimes is like when I can see somebody hasn't put a lot of effort into their application. So I talk about when I applied to 140 places, and I think what I used to do there, though, is at least 80 of those, I remember going through them, I made specific changes to my portfolio and my resume for that kind of company or that industry. I can see sometimes when people make the mistake of they're just like copying and pasting. I've had plenty of applicants even not even addressing me by name, because they've gotten my name as the hiring manager, but they've just sent it to a bunch of different people and they just use the wrong names. That's quite sad sometimes when I see that, because I can also empathize with what they're trying to do. So what I'll do in that situation is just give them that feedback, because that does hurt their chances. And then I guess the other thing with hiring people is like when you can get the sense from people that they don't feel like they want to be there, they feel like they're doing you a favor to join your team. That's never good. So that's something I've been seeing a little bit more of in the last kind of 3 years. Then some people are just feeling like they're unicorns, to use your term, a mythical creature with abilities that nobody else has. And I just think that's also just worrying in some ways and sad again, because it's like, I don't think those people realize maybe that they're their own worst enemy potentially. So that's the thing. But what I do love is when I'm interviewing people or I'm looking at CVs and I can see a person who cares about their work. And another reason I invest so much time in like the interview process is I'm always trying to find what I can help them with. So regardless of what we deliver as a team, I want their time to with me to be making them a better person, to a better designer overall. So that the time with me and in my team has been valuable, and vice versa. So can I learn something from them?
That's awesome. And it's really nice to hear. It seems like a lot of your past experiences have helped you be more grounded in this approach and of looking through all these like resumes and talking to people. I almost feel like it's like a reflection in a way of that.
Yeah, definitely. And I talk a lot about discomfort and the need, then developing the ability to navigate discomfort, because it's important. Discomfort is growth usually. That's why it's uncomfortable, because you're getting out of a comfort zone. When we built graduate programs as well, one of the things that I really was proud of the people in my team is we would write letters to every person who wasn't successful for the graduate program.
Oh, wow.
And give them a full write-up on like how they scored on different things, where they could improve, to the point that a few people would apply back.
I love that. I find that really inspiring that you've implemented this change. And I'd love to see that more often, because I don't think I've, even after asking for feedback, that I've ever received feedback, even when I was applying for jobs. And I know there's a lot of people out there that would appreciate that, because you want to know what you're doing wrong so you could get better.
Yeah, at least from their perspective. And then you can compare notes. If you apply for 3 jobs that you don't get and the feedback's similar, then you've got something you can focus on. But if it's one person who's, I just didn't like the jacket you wore, you're like, actually, they've done you a favor. You don't want to work at that company,
Yep,
basically.
exactly. Dean, I could probably talk to you for hours, but
Oh, sure.
maybe,
No problem.
maybe more for later. But before ending off, I wanted to ask if you had a piece of advice that you'd like to share to new grads, people who are looking to find their UX jobs breaking into their career. What would that be?
Ooh, so many things. I would say one is be curious and don't be afraid to be curious. It's the most important skill that a designer could have. And you've got to find your unique way of being curious. And then I think the other thing is just make stuff, keep making stuff to learn. I always say, try not to talk your point, try to demonstrate it. And the only way you can demonstrate it is by making stuff. And I think that includes then making the mistakes. You may see lots of work in the market, or you may see people that you look up to. Those people weren't born with a sketch license and a MacBook in their hand. They figured some stuff out in their lives, figured out their niche, and they made mistakes. And I think that's probably the most important thing, is you just got to be willing to do that and understand, like any form of fitness, if you're unfit, it's going to be uncomfortable and difficult. And the more you do it, the more fit you get at it and the more natural it feels. So that would be my overarching piece of advice, is just be curious and keep trying and keep making stuff. Yeah. And don't apologize so much. So many designers say sorry all the time.
It's also a Canadian thing to say sorry. If you've spoken to a lot of Canadians,
it's all
sorry
designers from all different countries. I mean, I'm just like, why are you saying sorry though? It's weird. Yeah. But yeah, this has been fantastic. I really appreciate the time. If you ever want to chat again, I'm right here at the computer. You just ping me and I'll turn the things on and I'll be here.
Thank you so much, Dean.